The Man Who Never Sleeps by Christian Glutalidge, prologue, 2:30 a.m. Maple Street was a wound stitched shut by darkness, every house sealed tight in sleep, every house but one. From his bedroom window, Ethan Morrison watched 1247 Maple Street like a sailor tracking a lighthouse in a storm. It glowed always. Windows blazing with artificial light at hours when only the lost or broken stayed awake. And Ethan, 17, insomniac, felt like both. 6 months ago, his father died of a heart attack. Sudden, unfair. 1 minute he was practicing law, the next he was on the kitchen floor. Ethan found him. Everything unraveled from there, his mother's career hanging by threads, his sister Lucy's silence growing louder. And Ethan's sleep? It vanished like a switch had been thrown. It started with grief. Now it was obsession. The man who moved into 1247 Maple 3 weeks after the funeral had no introduction, no housewarming, no welcome to the neighborhood. Ethan gave him a name anyway, the Lighthouse. Because he never turned off the lights, not once. Tonight, though, something new, a red pulse from the basement. Not steady, not chaotic, rhythmic, measured, hypnotic. Ethan leaned forward, bringing his father's binoculars to his eyes. They were scratched from years of court stakeouts and long stakeouts, but they still worked. Through the top floor window of the house across the street, a figure paced, slow, even steps, back and forth, a pattern. One Ethan had cataloged for weeks. The man never slept, and Ethan, stuck in his own insomnia, had started to wonder if that made them kin. But tonight, the red glow felt different, intimate, dangerous. He watched, he waited, and then, something impossible. The man stopped pacing, turned, looked straight into Ethan's window, and smiled. Chapter 1, Patterns in the Dark. Ethan Morrison had developed rituals, not the kind with candles or chanting. His were the kind born from sleepless nights and too many unanswered questions. Every evening, once his mother and sister had gone to bed, he'd climb into the desk chair beside his window and begin the watch. 47 Maple Street never disappointed. Lights on, always. Kitchen. Living room. Upstairs hallway. Even the garage had a flickering bulb that refused to die. It was as if the house itself feared the dark. Ethan documented everything. Harold Vance, age 52, left for work every morning at exactly 6:30, drove a silver Ford Focus, license plate 3YF291, came home at 5:15 p.m. sharp, ate alone, watched no TV, ordered Chinese on Tuesdays, Indian on Fridays, no visitors, no family, no dog, no cat, not even a plant on the windowsill, just light. Constant, sterile light. He kept a notebook hidden behind a loose floorboard beneath his bed. It contained dates, times, observations. Window movement observed 2:17 a.m. Microwave beep heard 4:42 a.m. Basement red light pulsing again, irregular pattern. He didn't know what he was looking for, only that something wasn't right. Ethan's mom, Sarah, chalked it all up to grief. "You're not sleeping again?" she asked over burnt toast and black coffee one morning. Her eyes were red, skin pale beneath smeared foundation. "Sweetie, this isn't healthy. You need rest." He nodded, smiled, lied. Sleep was a luxury for the sane, for the stable. He didn't feel like either. His sister Lucy, 14 and halfway through a goth phase, noticed too. "You're becoming that creepy guy in every horror movie," she muttered, catching him at the window one night. "Next thing you know, you'll be building a murder board and talking to pigeons." He didn't respond. Not because she was wrong, but because she might be right. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was instinct. A tightness in his gut every time he saw that pale figure drift past the upstairs window. Back and forth, always alone, always watching. Was it insomnia? Some psychological quirk? Maybe. But that didn't explain the red light. Or the way Harold Vance's footsteps matched a precise loop. 5 steps left, 5 back, turn, repeat. Ethan timed it, watched it night after night, a machine in human skin. And then there was the way Harold stared at the Morrison house. Not at random, not occasionally, but directly, through the kitchen window, into the living room, toward the bedrooms. Ethan had seen it. The man's eyes reflecting in the glass like searchlights. What kept Ethan awake at night wasn't fear. It was certainty. Harold Vance wasn't just some lonely old man. He was preparing for something. Because no one installs floodlights inside their basement. No one draws blackout curtains to hide lights they never turn off. No one watches someone else for hours unless they expect to be watched back. Chapter 2, Recognition. The night Harold Vance waved changed everything. It was just after 3 a.m. The street was still, silent. Even the usual bark from the Jennings dog down the block had vanished. Ethan sat in his usual spot, binoculars resting on his lap, notebook open, pen trembling in his fingers. Harold's upstairs window glowed like always. The pacing continued. 5 steps, turn, 5 steps, turn. But this time, Harold stopped. He turned, not randomly, not mid-pattern. It was intentional, like he heard something Ethan couldn't. The man approached the glass. He didn't squint, didn't search. His eyes locked straight onto Ethan's bedroom window like radar. And then he raised his hand. A slow wave. No smile. No acknowledgement. It was not a greeting. It was a message. Territory claimed. Surveillance noted. Ethan dropped the binoculars. His heart skidded. Palms sweating. He shut off his lamp and dropped to the floor, crouching behind his bed. Breath ragged. Ears ringing. Had Harold seen the binoculars? Had he been watching Ethan the whole time? Had the watcher become the watched? Did I leave the curtain open too far? Was the glare giving me away? Was he always looking back? Ethan stayed there for 20 minutes, motionless, listening, but nothing came. No footsteps outside, no knock on the door, just the distant hum of the Morrison home's fridge and the soft breathing of a sleeping house. At 3:40 a.m., he finally peeked out the window again. Harold was pacing, same path, same pattern, as if nothing had happened, but something had. That morning, Ethan couldn't meet his mother's eyes. She was up early, already dressed for a property showing in Fairview. Makeup fresh, smile brittle. She asked if he'd finally gotten some sleep. He lied again. Lucy, crunching cereal, barely acknowledged him, just flicked her phone screen with one black-nailed finger and muttered, "You look like shit." He didn't argue. He skipped school, pretended to walk toward the bus, then veered off and circled back around the neighborhood. He couldn't stop thinking about the wave. It had been precise, calculated. That afternoon, with the house empty, Ethan started digging. He didn't Google Harold Vance. He searched public records, cross-referenced property databases, even tried reverse address lookup. The result? Practically nothing. The deed to 1247 Maple was clean, sold in cash, no mortgage. The buyer of record? V.H. Vance. Ethan's pulse quickened. Vincent, Harold, Vance. Middle name match. Not common. He kept digging. No social media, no LinkedIn, no real digital trail at all. Just an old newspaper article buried 6 pages deep in a local court archive. A headline, "Home Invasion Leads to 15-Year Sentence for Local Man." The photo was grainy. The man was heavier, beard thicker, eyes angrier. But Ethan recognized him instantly. It was Harold. His father had prosecuted him. The article mentioned a violent robbery, elderly woman, assault, conviction, 15 years. Harold had served his time, got out. 3 weeks later, moved into the house directly across from the man who helped put him away. Except that man, Ethan's father, was gone, which left only his family. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't proximity. It was a plan. Ethan printed the article, slipped it inside the back of his notebook. His hands shook as he stared out the window again. Harold was home, sitting in his kitchen this time, staring out through the glass, not at the road, not into space, at Ethan's house. Their eyes locked again, no binoculars needed now. Harold raised a mug to his lips, sipped slowly, then tilted the cup toward Ethan, a silent toast. Ethan stepped away from the window. The pacing had changed. That night, Harold no longer drifted randomly across the top floor. He moved deliberately from one window to another, living room, kitchen, hallway, bedroom, checking angles, sighting lines. Each spot gave a different view into the Morrison home. He wasn't watching anymore. He was measuring. Ethan couldn't sleep. Not that he ever truly did, but now, even his micronaps were poisoned with paranoia. He locked and relocked every window, every door. His fingers ached from testing knobs. He rigged pots against the back patio door to act as a crude alarm. He stayed awake until dawn, notebook in hand. By sunrise, he knew this was bigger than grief, bigger than coincidence. He was being hunted. Not metaphorically. Harold Vance wasn't some reclusive weirdo. He was a predator, and Ethan was in the cage. Chapter 3: The Connection. The house felt smaller in daylight. Ethan moved through it like a stranger. Every room now seemed like a stage, every window a weak spot, every ordinary object a potential tool or trap. The safety he once took for granted had evaporated. And it wasn't because he knew Harold Vance was watching. It was because he had proof. On Saturday morning, while his mother was at another open house, and Lucy slept off a midnight TikTok binge, Ethan slipped down into the basement. He hadn't been down here in months. His father's old office, once lined with neatly stacked case files and floor-to-ceiling legal books, was now a storage room, barely lit by a single hanging bulb and buried beneath dusty holiday boxes and forgotten sports gear. He moved slowly, stepping over boxes labeled Christmas and Lucy's old school projects. At the far end, he found the old filing cabinet. Rusted, locked, but the key still hung on a nail above it. His father had never believed in hiding things from his children, just in making sure they had to be smart to find them. The top drawer was full of old newspaper clippings, commendations, client thank you letters. Ethan smiled faintly at a dusty certificate titled Outstanding Service in Criminal Prosecution. It bore his father's name in gold-embossed lettering. The second drawer, though, was different. Folders, neatly labeled in his father's meticulous print. Divorce, civil litigation, malicious trespass, arson. Then, Vance, Vincent Harold, 2009. Ethan froze. The file was thicker than the others. He pulled it free and opened it across a dusty table. Inside, a black and white mugshot, a younger Harold Vance, thicker beard, sunken cheeks, cold eyes, staring through the camera as if already planning revenge. Charge, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, case number 09287B, victim, Loretta Mayfield, 73. Injuries, severe concussion, multiple lacerations, broken ribs. Conviction, 15 years, no parole for the first 12. There were witness statements, forensic reports, a crime scene photo of a broken window, and a trail of blood leading to a toppled nightstand. Ethan felt his stomach churn. At the bottom of the file was his father's summary memo. Typed in clean courier font, it was dated November 19, 2009. This is a career-making case. Public sentiment is high. Vance has a long record of escalating violence. He's dangerous, calculating, and remorseless. I won't rest until he's behind bars. Ethan's fingers tightened on the paper. The timeline fit too perfectly. Harold had been released within the last year. His father had died 6 months ago. Harold moved in 3 weeks later. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a campaign. A ghost from his father's past had stepped out of prison and across the street. He stuffed the file into his backpack and climbed back upstairs. In his room, he locked the door and spread the pages across his floor like puzzle pieces. His father's handwritten notes told him everything. Vance had pled not guilty, claimed mistaken identity, no remorse, no apology. After sentencing, he'd allegedly shouted across the courtroom, "You'll pay for this." It had sounded theatrical in 2009. It sounded prophetic now. Ethan opened his laptop. He traced Vance's prison record. Release date, March 21st. Ethan's father died April 2nd. Stroke, they'd said. Sudden. Stress-related. But now Ethan wondered, had he received a letter? A visit? A phone call that pushed him over the edge? There was no proof. Not yet. But Ethan could feel the shape of it forming. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't paranoid. And he wasn't going to wait until Harold Vance made the next move. He flipped open his notebook and wrote a single word on a clean page. Retaliation. Then he underlined it twice. That night, Ethan stayed off the window. No binoculars. No peeking. Instead, he plotted. If Harold had a plan, so would he. Chapter 4. The Surveillance. Ethan had always thought of the word surveillance as a distant concept. Spy movies, Cold Wars, cameras hidden in houseplants. But now it lived across the street. And it had a name. Vincent Harold Vance. He waited until Wednesday. Tuesdays were Indian takeout nights, Fridays Chinese. But Wednesdays? Harold came home, ate in silence, then left again at 7:10 p.m. Ethan had tracked it for 2 weeks, gone until after midnight, never once deviated. Tonight, Ethan planned to get inside. He didn't tell Lucy, didn't tell his mom. If either of them knew what he was doing, they'd stop him, or worse, call the police, and the last thing he wanted was to be labeled delusional and sleep-deprived, even if it wasn't entirely untrue. So he waited for the taillights of Harold's Ford Focus to vanish down Maple Street. Then he crossed the road, backpack on, gloves tight, no phone, no light. The front door, of course, was locked. The back, dead-bolted, but the basement window, low to the ground and half buried beneath a row of cracked garden bricks, was cracked open, just enough. Almost like an invitation, he hesitated, only a second. Then he slid the pane upward, braced his hands on the frame, and slipped inside. The air was thick, warm, humming faintly, and red. The light was stronger now, Not a bulb or a lamp, but a machine, some kind of crude electrical rig with exposed wires and blinking diodes, bathing the room in pulses of crimson. The basement was unfinished, cement walls, dusty floor, but the space had been transformed. On the far wall, photographs. Dozens, no, hundreds. Ethan stood frozen, staring at himself, sleeping, walking to school, behind the counter at Java Bean, where he worked Saturdays, sitting in class. Images from every angle, every time of day, some through curtains, some clearly taken inside the house. His breath caught. There were pictures of his mother at her desk, glass of wine beside her keyboard, Lucy in the backyard, reading under the tree, the three of them eating dinner, unaware of the lens just beyond the kitchen window. Ethan wanted to vomit. Below each photo, handwritten notes, precise, cold. Lucy, recurring outdoor pattern, vulnerable between 4 Harbor, 5:15 p.m. Sarah, isolated, wine intake increasing. Ethan, insomniac, prone to surveillance behavior, high risk, high reward. In the center, a whiteboard labeled The Plan, sticky notes, red thread timestamps, floor plans of the Morrison house printed from online public records, alarm schematics, a photo of the family's security keypad, and one folder placed directly beneath Ethan's photo. Labeled in marker, Phase 1, Ethan. Inside, sketches of his room, detailed notes on his habits, time-stamped entries logging the exact moments he moved from his bed to the window. Emotional evaluations, susceptible to guilt, isolation, trauma response. One phrase was scrawled larger than the rest. Crack him first, destabilize the core. Ethan staggered back. This wasn't just surveillance, it was psychological warfare. The red pulses reflected across the wall, giving the photos a sense of motion, like they were breathing, watching him. Then he heard it. A door. Upstairs. He checked his watch. 8:04 p.m. Harold wasn't supposed to be home for hours, but now, footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing. Ethan darted behind a column of old moving boxes. His heart was a war drum. Sweat slid down his spine. "I know you're down there, Ethan." The voice was calm, confident, closer now. "Your father always thought he was smarter than everyone else. Guess the apple didn't fall far, huh?" Ethan backed up, hands shaking, feeling blindly behind him for a weapon. A pipe, a wrench, anything. "But see, I planned for this." Harold's voice drifted nearer, echoing off the concrete. "I left that window unlocked for a reason. This was a trap." Harold wanted him to see it. Chapter 5, The Shrine. Ethan crouched behind the boxes, barely breathing. The red light pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, sinister, alive. The door at the top of the stairs creaked. Slow, 1 step, 2. Harold was descending. There was no escape. No other exit. The basement window was too far and too loud. Ethan pressed himself against the cold concrete wall, watching through a slit in the stacked boxes as Harold's shadow stretched across the floor. He was humming, a low, tuneless sound that barely qualified as music. It was worse than silence. Then came the voice. "You know, your dad once told me, revenge is just a failure of imagination." Harold chuckled softly. "I suppose I disagree." Ethan didn't move. The moment was knife-thin. One mistake, one breath too loud, and Harold would find him. But as the footsteps approached the wall of boxes, they stopped. "You're looking at it, aren't you?" Harold was talking to him, not searching, not angry, confident, certain. "You found the shrine. Good." He stepped further into the room, slowly circling the edges. His boots tapped the floor in an irregular rhythm. 3 steps, pause, then 2, then turn. "Let me guess," he continued. "You saw the photos first. That always gets people. It's something about the scale, I think. The sheer amount of attention I've given your little family. Unnerving, isn't it?" Ethan gripped a rusty length of rebar behind him, just in case. Harold's voice floated toward the photos now. "They always think it's about rage, but this isn't anger, Ethan. This is devotion, precision. Your father took my life away. This," he gestured, and Ethan heard paper crinkle, "is me returning the favor." The footsteps turned again, heading back toward the stairs. "I'll give you tonight. Consider it. Phase 2. A pause. Then right before disappearing back up the steps, Harold added softly, "Don't waste it." The basement door shut. Ethan waited 10 whole minutes before he dared move. When he stood, his knees nearly buckled. He clutched the rebar like it might anchor him to reality. His eyes moved again to the wall of photos. They were clearer now, not just snapshots. They were data, strategic intelligence, photos of Lucy, time-stamped near sunset, notes about after-school routine, headphones in, awareness low. Sarah entering and exiting the real estate office, always alone. Ethan himself at the coffee shop, labeled social facade, emotional dissonance. There were dozens of pages, schedules, maps, notes on Ethan's insomnia, a whole behavioral study laid out like an FBI profile. He traced the red yarn on the whiteboard. It connected moments, Sarah's late work night to a noise complaint Ethan had filed, Lucy's forgotten house key to a power outage that happened the same night. Small things, coincidences, until you saw them all together. Harold hadn't just been watching. He'd been orchestrating, messing with their lives piece by piece, quietly, steadily, so it would all seem natural. Ethan remembered the strange tapping noise in the attic last month, the missing groceries, the Wi-Fi going out only during Lucy's tutoring sessions, the accidental text his mom had sent to the wrong number. It wasn't chaos. It was calibration. He walked to the center of the wall and stared at the image that had haunted him most, a photo of himself, asleep. It was one of the rare nights he'd passed out from exhaustion just before dawn. Harold had captured it, up close, too close. The angle suggested one terrifying thing. Harold had been inside the Morrison house. Ethan flipped over the Phase 1 folder. Taped to the back was a page with rough sketches. One was the family's front door, labeled Keypad Override equals Model 17C, vulnerable to backdoor exploit. Another was his room. A line of red ink circled the bed and read, Dream State Vulnerable. Experiment with auditory triggers. He backed away. This wasn't revenge. It was possession. Ethan turned and ran. Out the window, across the street, into his house, up the stairs, into the bathroom. He vomited everything he hadn't eaten that day. And when he was done, he locked every door in the house. Twice. Chapter 6, The Trap. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. He sat on the floor of his bedroom, back pressed against the door, every light turned off. A baseball bat lay across his lap, and his phone, finally retrieved from his backpack, was clutched in his hand, emergency number ready on the screen. But he didn't call anyone. Who would believe him? Hi, yes, my neighbor across the street is a convicted felon who's been stalking my family and built a surveillance shrine in his basement. Oh, and he left the window open so I could find it. I swear, I wasn't trespassing. Even he didn't believe how insane it sounded when said out loud. Besides, Harold wanted him to call the police. That was part of it. Just like he'd wanted Ethan to find the basement. Just like he'd wanted him to panic. This was still part of the game. A psychological manipulation campaign. That's what the notes called it. Designed to destabilize the target family unit over time through sustained paranoia and subtle violation of routine. In other words, ruin them. The plan was already working. His mom was unraveling. The drinking, the late nights, the dead expressions. Lucy had started skipping classes, lying about study sessions, avoiding eye contact. And Ethan, he'd stopped sleeping, eating, functioning, all by design. When the sun came up, Ethan was still awake. He showered, ate dry cereal, sat at the kitchen table like everything was normal. Lucy came downstairs, gave him a strange look. You look like you spent the night in a coffin. He didn't answer. Their mom walked in behind her, clutching a coffee mug like a lifeline. Her phone buzzed in her hand, another cancellation. Another listing falling through. She mumbled something about money and took her coffee to the sofa. Ethan waited until both of them had settled, then headed back upstairs. He needed to go back, not out of curiosity, out of necessity. He couldn't fight what he didn't understand, couldn't win if he didn't know the rules. And Harold was a master at control. If Ethan wanted a chance at stopping him, he had to learn everything. Every corner of that basement, every trigger, every inch of that warped mind. He waited again for Harold to leave for work, 6:30 sharp. Then, back across the street. You've been here already. You survived once, you can do it again. He slipped through the same basement window. This time he came prepared. Flashlight, gloves, a small GoPro hidden in his hoodie pocket, recording everything. The photos hadn't changed, but the whiteboard had. A new note scrawled across the top, Phase 2 underway. Ethan scanned the board. There were fresh notes. Ethan returned to scene. Good, subject now fully engaged. Stage for next act. Frame job begins next week. Frame job. His eyes flicked lower. A list. Evidence to plant. Flash drive. Pornographic material falsified. Damaged school property link. Anonymous tips. Disturbed teen. Violent tendencies. Unstable due to father's death. Obsessed with neighbor, harassment likely. It was all there. Harold's next phase, a complete character assassination. He wasn't just going to torment Ethan, he was going to destroy him. The camera in his pocket was still rolling. He whispered aloud, voice barely audible. "This is Ethan Morrison. Today is April 12th. I'm inside the home of Vincent Harold Vance, recording evidence of a surveillance and harassment campaign. He's targeting my family." He froze. A creak above. Not the front door, not a step. A creak from the vent. He killed the flashlight, pressed himself against the shadowed wall and listened. For a full minute, silence. Then the voice. "Harold." Again. "I admire your dedication, Ethan. Really, I do." Ethan held his breath. "You could have stayed scared, could have hidden under your bed, but no, you came back. That's initiative. I suppose I should reward that." Ethan moved. Fast. He sprinted to the far end of the basement, where a tall shelf blocked the path to a second storage room he hadn't noticed before. He squeezed through, closed the door silently. Inside, more photos. But these were older, different people, different houses, different towns. And at the center of every photo wall, the same man. Harold Vance, smiling, watching, haunting. He'd done this before. Ethan realized with a sickening drop in his chest that Maple Street wasn't the beginning, it was the latest chapter. Harold had been building toward this for years. Family after family, identity after identity, all part of a much longer story. And now Ethan was the finale. He fled, through the shelf, back to the open basement. The red light flickered again. Faster now. He reached the window. Harold's voice echoed from the stairs, closer than ever. "You're not the first, Ethan." A pause. "But maybe you'll be the last." Ethan dove out the window, rolled across the lawn, and sprinted home. Chapter 7. Face to face. The front door slammed behind him. Ethan leaned back against it, chest heaving. His shirt clung to his skin with sweat. His limbs buzzed with leftover adrenaline. But he'd made it. For now, he bolted the locks. 1, 2, chain across. Deadbolt twisted. Upstairs, Lucy's bedroom door was shut, her music pulsing faintly through the walls. Their mom wasn't home. Thank God. Ethan stumbled into the kitchen and collapsed into a chair. The camera, he pulled it from his hoodie. Still recording, he uploaded the footage to a cloud drive, one copy to his email, another to a hidden folder. Just in case. If something happened to him now, someone would know. He hadn't slept in nearly 60 hours. He tried briefly to rest, curled on the couch, baseball bat still within reach. But it wasn't sleep that came. It was the knock. 3 hard raps on the front door. Ethan didn't move. Another knock. Slower, louder. He crept to the peephole and looked. Rested in full security guard uniform, clean shave, ball cap in hand. He looked calm, professional, safe. The mask was perfect. "Ethan," Harold said softly, almost kindly, "we need to talk." Every instinct screamed, "Don't open the door." But Ethan's grip on reality had frayed. He'd spent days chasing shadows. Now they were knocking. He reached for the knob, unlocked it, opened the door halfway. Harold didn't step in, didn't even lean forward. He just smiled. "You've been doing your homework." Ethan didn't speak. "I wondered when you'd make your move," Harold said, eyes scanning the room behind Ethan. "You've got your father's edge. He was sharp too, until he broke." "You killed him," Ethan said. Harold tilted his head, almost amused. "I didn't touch him," he said. "I didn't have to. That's the power of a little pressure. The mind collapses long before the body does." Ethan's hand gripped the bat tighter behind the door. "You've been inside my house," Harold nodded. "Several times. Your mother sleeps heavily when she's been drinking. Lucy never hears a thing with those headphones. And you," he pointed at Ethan's chest, "you stare at walls and forget to blink. I've been testing you for months." Ethan should have slammed the door, screamed, called the cops, but Harold kept talking. "Your father ruined my life. 15 years. Gone. My wife left me. My kids moved on. My mother died alone. He stood in that courtroom and called me a monster, and the jury nodded. Just like that, my whole world burned." He paused, and now his world is burning, slowly, quietly. Harold leaned in, just enough for Ethan to see the thin scar along his jawline. "I've been inside every part of your life. I've read your school essays, listened to your mom's therapy sessions. I know what your sister dreams about. I know the last time your smoke alarm battery died." "You're insane," Harold laughed. Soft, unhurried. "No, Ethan, I'm thorough. There's a difference." Ethan steadied himself. "You've made a mistake." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Have I?" Ethan opened the door wider. Behind him, on the kitchen table, sat the GoPro, screen facing outward, still blinking red, recording. I filmed everything. Your wall, your plan, your voice. If anything happens to me or my family, it's already backed up and shared. Harold stared at the camera, a long pause. Then he smiled again. Good, he said. He turned, walked down the steps, across the street, into 1247 Maple, closed the door behind him. Ethan stood frozen. No chase, no threat, just Harold, retreating. But the game had changed. Ethan wasn't just a target now, he was a player. Chapter 8, The Master Plan. The next day, the sun rose like a warning. Ethan hadn't slept. Again, but something had shifted inside him. The fear was still there, gnawing, acidic, but layered now with something sharper, clarity. Harold had revealed too much, and Ethan had listened. He spent the morning piecing everything together. The timeline, the manipulations, the way Harold moved like a ghost through their lives, testing boundaries, the photo wall, the staged unlock, the monologues. They weren't impulsive. They were rehearsed. Harold wasn't improvising, he was executing a sequence. You're not the first, he'd said, but Ethan had a chance to be the last. He reached out to the only adult who might believe him, Jeff Raleigh, his father's former law partner. Jeff was retired now, lived 2 counties away, had a reputation for being old school and paranoid. Perfect. Ethan sent a message, cryptic but urgent. Need help. It's about one of Dad's old cases. Vance. I have proof. Call me. While he waited, Ethan started documenting everything. He scanned the photos he'd grabbed, wrote out a full timeline of every incident, every shift in his mother's or sister's behavior that might have been engineered. He printed out the digital copies from the GoPro and taped them to his bedroom wall. By 3 p.m., the room looked like a war room. Every taped photo was a wound. Every red ink circle, a nerve. There were things he hadn't seen before. Notes Harold had written to himself, coded phrases that now made sense. Install auditory cue near third stair tread. Loosen garden gate hinge, increase environmental stress. Adjust HVAC to disrupt sleeping patterns, temperature drop equals agitation. He'd adjusted their air conditioning. Who does that? Harold had studied them. Not just watched, engineered them. Like they were lab rats in a maze he'd built from grief and routine. And all of it was leading to something. The endgame. Frame job begins next week. Ethan pulled the file back out, looked again at the bullet points. Flash drive, school vandalism, anonymous tips. He could already see how it would play out. Harold would plant the flash drive, maybe in Ethan's school locker. Then alert school officials anonymously, concerned neighbor, worried friend. The contents wouldn't matter. The allegation alone would start a chain reaction. Suspension, investigation, character collapse. Meanwhile, odd behavior at home, paranoia, insomnia, obsessive surveillance would match the profile Harold had built. Ethan would be the disturbed kid lashing out after a tragic loss. He'd be the problem. The story, not the victim. No, not this time. Jeff Raleigh called at 5:12 p.m. Ethan explained everything, not the break-ins. That part was too much. Just the surveillance, the case files, the footage, and Harold's confession. Jeff didn't doubt him. Not once. I remember Vance, Jeff said. Your dad called him a volcano in human skin. Look, send me everything. Every file, photo, timestamp. I've got contacts. We'll handle it quietly, by the book. But you need to stay safe. Ethan sent it all. It felt like the first real move in a long war. As night fell, Ethan sat by the window again. But this time, he didn't have binoculars. Just his notebook and a voice recorder. Let Harold watch. Let him pace and measure and adjust the damn thermostat. Let him see that Ethan was still standing, still fighting. At 2:04 a.m., the power in the house flickered. Once, twice. Then the lights went out. Complete blackout. Ethan moved fast, grabbed the bat, the flashlight, his phone, texted Jeff. Power cut. Suspect Vance. Backup plan? Then, out of instinct, he checked the front door. Still locked. But the basement? He crept down the hallway. Every hair on his body was raised. The silence had depth to it, like something enormous holding its breath. He flicked on the flashlight and stepped into the basement. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. On the washer, a single printed photograph. It was Ethan, sleeping, taken tonight. He hadn't fallen asleep. He hadn't. Except, what if he had? What if the moment he'd leaned back in the chair, for just a few seconds, Harold had been waiting. The frame job had already started. Chapter 9, The Son's Gambit. Ethan stared at the photo on the washing machine. It showed him slumped in his desk chair, lips slightly parted, eyes closed, sleeping, or drugged. He hadn't fallen asleep, he was sure of it. Except he wasn't, not anymore. Harold had been in the house again, not watching, not pacing, inside, the blackout, the picture, the silence. It had all been timed, controlled, like everything else. But this time, Ethan was ready. He carried the photo upstairs, locked it in his drawer, and texted Jeff again. He was here, left a photo, confirmed break-in. I'm taking control now. Then he opened his laptop and did what his father had always done when he felt cornered. He prepared a case. Every folder, every message, every audio recording. He organized it all into a single encrypted archive, Vance dossier final.zip, and then he scheduled a timed email. 2 recipients. Jeff Raleigh, Officer Monica Chen, his dad's old contact from the DA's office. Message set to send automatically in 48 hours, unless Ethan manually stopped it. Insurance. Harold wanted a final act. Ethan would give him one. Friday. The school hallways felt like a dream. Flashing lockers, blurred faces, muted conversations. Ethan hadn't been here in days. It was like entering someone else's life. He ignored the stares. He was used to them now. People thought he was spiraling. Grief. Sleep deprivation. Maybe a little unhinged. Good. Let them think that. Let Harold think it too. Because he had a plan now. He wouldn't wait to be framed. He'd bait Harold into revealing everything. After school, Ethan visited the local print shop and dropped a sealed envelope in their same-day courier box. Inside, copies of the GoPro footage, a map of Harold's surveillance rig, and a note: if anything happens to me or my family, forward this to the following names. No edits, no questions. He paid cash, no return address. By evening, the house felt different. Not safe, never safe, but contained. Like he'd vacuum-sealed the chaos into something he could finally see clearly. At 11:57 p.m., a notification popped up on his phone. Motion detected, front porch Harold, standing just beyond the ring of light, arms folded, smiling. Ethan didn't move, didn't flinch. He just turned on the porch light and waved, the way Harold had waved that first time. Territorial. This time it was Ethan's message. I'm not scared anymore. At 2 a.m., the trap closed. Harold broke in again. Same route, same quiet entry. But this time, Ethan was awake and waiting. He stayed hidden in the hallway closet, watched Harold move through the living room, then up the stairs. Harold entered Ethan's bedroom, confident, camera in hand. That's when Ethan slipped behind him and hit record. You're on tape, Harold. Harold turned slowly, stared at the phone, then at Ethan, and laughed. Doesn't matter. No one will believe you. Ethan took a step forward. They will now. Sirens wailed in the distance, approaching fast. Jeff had sent Officer Chen. She'd traced Ethan's call log, recognized the risk, came early. And she wasn't alone. Flashlights, voices. Harold's expression cracked. For the first time, he looked surprised. Then afraid. This was your mistake. You got close. You got cocky. You thought I was weak. You forgot who raised me. Harold didn't speak as they cuffed him. He didn't fight, just looked back once over his shoulder as they led him away. His smile was gone. Chapter 10. Justice Served. Vincent Harold Vance was arraigned 2 days later. The charges were extensive: stalking, unlawful entry, wiretapping, violating parole, possession of illegal surveillance equipment, and tampering with a minor's school records. And that was just the beginning. Jeff Raleigh and Officer Monica Chen ensured the GoPro footage, basement photographs, and digital files were all admissible. Ethan's meticulously documented evidence, his notes, schedules, audio files, painted a portrait not just of obsession, but of long-term psychological abuse. Harold's defense was weak. Temporary insanity, stress, grief. The judge didn't buy it. You weren't grieving, the judge said. You were calculating. Harold showed no emotion during sentencing. No apology, just silence. The same silence he had cultivated so effectively in the dark corners of Maple Street. He was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years. No parole. This time, the bars would be physical, not just psychological. Ethan didn't attend the final hearing. He didn't need to. He already knew the outcome. The Morrison house began to breathe again. The lights no longer flickered. The doors no longer felt like paper walls. Lucy smiled again, tentatively, then more often. Their mom started painting the kitchen on weekends, as if scrubbing the house clean from the inside out. Ethan kept the curtains open now. No more hiding. He slept sometimes. Not always. But when he did, it was deeper than before. No more pacing shadows, no more red lights, just quiet. Epilogue: Finding Peace. 3 months later, the house across the street stood empty. The blinds were drawn, the porch light broken. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard. Ethan didn't look at it much anymore. He didn't need to. He'd started therapy, at first because Jeff insisted, later because it helped. The dreams didn't stop, but they dulled. And he learned to understand his insomnia not as a curse, but as a signal, a warning, a gift even. Something that kept him awake long enough to see the truth. He still kept his father's binoculars on his nightstand, not for watching, not anymore, just as a reminder of vigilance, of what it cost to ignore your gut, of what it meant to fight back, even when no one else could see the enemy. On the first night of summer, Ethan slept with the window open. He lay back in bed, listening to crickets outside and the faint hum of a town that had gone back to sleep. He let the darkness settle over him like a warm blanket, not a threat now, but a curtain, safe, quiet, whole. Sometimes, staying awake long enough is what saves you. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, maybe buy me a coffee. It is your support that enables us to keep producing free stories. Link in bio. Please subscribe, ring the bell, and tell a friend about my listening library.